Welcome everybody to another gLocal webinar. My name is Parfait Kasongo, and for today's webinar, we will be discussing M&E culture, the M&E culture baseline study that Twende conducted in 5 African countries. Before we get into our presentations, I would like to quickly go through some house rules. I'd like to ask all our participants to please stay muted at all times. Keep your videos off at all times. Questions and answer sessions will follow after all the presentations I've gone through. All questions are welcomed, and you simply have to press the chat box right at the bottom of your screen as illustrated and enter your question over there. When all our presentations have gone through or are done, I will read out the questions to our speakers who will answer them. Depending on how much time we have left, our speakers will go through as many questions as possible. 2 to 3 questions, that is the target that we are hoping for. You are encouraged to put in your questions in there. And here are our speakers. We have Kara Waller, who is the Twende Program Manager and a member of the Management Committee, and followed by Dr. Nana Oparejan, who is the Director of the National Development Planning Commission in Ghana and a member of the Twende Management Committee. And then after him, we have Abdul Muanika, who is the Principal Economist at the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda, also a member of the Twende Management Committee. And without any further ado, I will give the floor to our first speaker, Kara Waller, who will speak to why Twende conducted the M&E culture baseline studies in the African continent. Kara, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Parfait. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Twende's seminar on M&E culture. I just wanted to spend a few minutes setting the scene, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Twende Mbele, just give you a bit of a background on the program. So Twende is a partnership-based approach to peer learning. We are a network of 6 countries now. We began with Benin, South Africa, and Uganda in 2016 or 2017. I think we officially, it says right there, 2015. We officially got funding from DFID and began institutionalizing and formalizing the partnership with CLEAR AA and IDEV at the African Development Bank. At the moment, the 6 countries are Kenya, Ghana, Niger, Benin, South Africa, and Uganda. And basically they collaborate to improve their monitoring and evaluation systems. And country ownership is the key principle. So we are a country-owned and a country-led program. This is the theory of change of Twende Mbele. So the overall impact that we're looking for is improved development outcomes. But in the intermediate and long term, what we're trying to do is capacitate government systems to use evaluation and to make those systems more comprehensive, coordinated, and sustained, and ensure that M&E evidence is influencing government decision-making. So the reason we sort of did a M&E culture baseline study is to look at those outcomes around M&E systems and say, we're doing a lot of technical work in terms of policies and activities around making systems gender responsive and rapid devising new rapid evaluation tools and that sort of thing. But how do we make sure this is a sustained effort? And what are sort of the enabling environmental factors that need to support this technical work? So for us, M&E culture is about saying, what is the mix of information that's needed for decision makers to make quality decisions or better decisions regarding program and policy performance? So that means that we're trying to inculcate a culture of inquiry based on a systematic use of evidence. And not just M&E, but for our purposes, we want to create an evaluative culture. Because we believe that a weak evaluative culture undermines attempts at building a results-oriented system. So what we want is that people are looking quite systematically into how to learn from performance and how to improve performance. And for us, we don't want an evaluative culture or evaluation culture that specifically builds accountability. What we want is to build a culture that encourages learning within government. So encouraging self-reflection and self-examination, experimentation on one level, and a tolerance of failure. But for us, we see that an evaluative culture needs leadership and it needs organizational support structures. So in the case of the baseline study, we did ask questions around how demand is expressed within an M&E system and how much leadership there is. And then what are some of the organizational systems, practices, and procedures that are sort of reinforcing this idea of a learning culture or an evaluative culture. Next slide. Oh, yep. So what we're saying is that culture and systems reinforce each other. So M&E culture is a subculture of the overall organizational culture, which is determined by the political context of the bureaucracy. So in that sense, we can say that the identity, the norms, the behaviors of the people within the system and the system itself are mutually reinforcing, so that the systems dictate the way people behave, but that people can dictate back to the system. So it's a mutually reinforcing idea. And so for us, we find that the baseline culture survey was to check in and see if this rhetoric around whether or not there is a commitment to learning and to accountability is actually manifesting in a compliance culture or a learning culture, and if there is a genuine attempt at setting up a system and the types of structures that reinforce a learning culture. So, excuse me. The survey itself was done in Ghana, Kenya, Benin, South Africa, and Kenya. Did I say that? Uganda, I think is the one I missed. So the first 3 countries were done in 2017, and then Kenya and Ghana were done in 2019. It looked across a variety of purposefully selected government departments, as those people were involved in the national M&E system. There's a sort of sample size set, given how many people there are in the system, etc. And 46% of the respondents were senior managers. So the idea was to get a sense from the leadership how they viewed it, and then to also get a sense from other levels of what their interpretation of the culture was. There was not a lot of qualitative questions, so it can be a little bit hard to read the findings. I will say at this, to interpret the findings rather, but I will say at this juncture that there's a chapter in an upcoming book called Evidence in Practice. There's written by Stanley and Takumba and some other people. So you can read the findings in depth there. I'm not going to go into the actual findings of the 5 countries, because that's why we have Nana and Abdul to take you through their particular country findings. But in general, across the 5 countries, I will say that there was a mixed picture. There was significant demand for M&E evidence from ministers and senior managers, but there were a relatively high number of findings from evaluations that were concealed, and about 40% of respondents perceived management as not champion honesty about performance. So again, that goes back to our ideas of how leadership needs to be, I guess, championing this idea of a learning culture and using M&E for improvement. There also seemed to be somewhat limited respect for evidence-based decision-making. And there was a finding there that managers were not receiving the information in a timely enough manner. And 50% of managers feared admitting mistake. Hierarchy and a lack of money are big barriers to using evidence. So the hierarchy thing is about people, I guess, and this is about a culture within the bureaucracy of not being able to talk honestly higher up. So the next one was that around this, so this doesn't create a great environment for learning. M&E was also not seen as very influential in terms of getting other departments or managers to be making changing decisions or changing course based on findings. But it's quite hard to get a sense of what is a good measure or what isn't, especially in a baseline study. So what we're saying is that although in a third of cases findings are concealed, that does mean that in 2/3 of cases findings are not concealed, which is actually quite a good marker really on one level of saying that there is transparency and an attempt to be accountable and perhaps hopefully to learn from that. So we need to do a follow-up study, which we will do next year, and see if things have changed and figure out how to interpret some of this a bit more. But for us in Twende and Belly, trying to think about what this all means to us is also to say that cultural change takes a long time, and that there are various systems that interact with what is an evaluative culture. And these other subcultures can inhibit and foster the evaluative culture. So how do we sort of influence the bureaucracy and get managers to stop fearing making mistakes? And then how do we balance the idea of improving the influence of M&E while integrating the idea of the culture of inquiry or of learning into all units? We want to keep this idea that evaluation is seen as an essential tool for improving the effectiveness of public action. But we also need to increase the funding and capacity for internal evaluation and for leadership. And we need to improve managers' ability to understand and use findings. So sometimes, so for Twende, this means that we've embarked on a series of work around building demand and building more champions within each country, and to do a round of capacity building with a higher level of government officer to improve their capacity, and to start thinking about how we can start generating evidence from an internal or hybridizing between external and internal. So yeah, that's the main implications for us, and we look forward to hearing from others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cara, and thank you for keeping to your allocated time. And just another reminder to all our participants, if you have any questions, you just want to go down into the chat box and just type in your questions there. I will be reading out your questions to our speakers. You're welcome to, if you can remember the names of the speakers, you're welcome to just add them to the question so I can direct it to the right speaker. And not to take up too much more time, our next speaker is Abdul. Abdul will be taking us on some of the, or rather, will be speaking to us about the M&E culture in Uganda. Abdul, the floor is yours. There we go. Now we can hear you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, all of us. The evaluative culture in Uganda can be looked at through one, the national M&E policy on the public sector, which basically emphasizes timely provision of credible, accurate information on the performance of government. And it also emphasizes the need to embed M&E in the management practices of ministries, departments, agencies, and local governments. I believe that second point speaks the evaluative or M&E culture. It also strengthens the coordination of the supply and demand of monitoring and evaluation. I will be talking more about that in the later slides. But the policy also emphasizes the need to learn from evaluations, okay? Rather than just doing evaluation, we need to learn from them. And to be able to learn from evaluations, we have to have a culture of using information generated from evaluations. Next slide. The policy emphasizes the use of M&E results, which I believe is the subject of discussion today. In the sense that there is need for not only results being produced through the M&E systems, but they should be seen, be used to influence management decisions. And therefore, through the policy, government of Uganda has been able to emphasize the need for establishing learning mechanisms, okay, so that as we pick information through the system, the emphasis in addition is on learning. But also the policy, in order to ensure that information is used that is generated through the system, there is a legislation to enforce and compel MDAS and local governments to make a use of evaluation results. Next slide, please. So what are the approaches that we are using in Uganda to emphasize and bring on board the culture, the M&E culture? One is we are strengthening and continue to do so the use of evidence in decision making. This entails capacity building across MDAs and local governments on how to generate quality information for better decision making. We are rolling out the management performance tool, MPAT, which emphasizes the use or the focus on administrative and standard practices to enhance performance. It's a new tool brought on board by Twende, and we think that if we roll this one out for MDAs and local governments, there will be improvement in performance management. But we also addressing the issue of how responsive the national M&E policy, the cross-cutting issues such as gender, environment, as well as non-state actors, commonly known as NGOs or civil society organizations. Also emphasizing the need to always update ourselves on the extent of supply and demand of evaluations to enhance public service delivery. Oftentimes we have situations where management needs to make decisions, but they don't often make those decisions for a number of reasons, and among which Kara talked about, that they fear making mistakes. So we took a deliberate decision to train managers on the use of evidence in decision making, and the findings were very interesting. And also, we are aware very much that decision makers don't have a lot of time to wait for evaluations that take years to deliver results. We're emphasizing the use of rapid evaluations to be able to help decision makers to take decisions as quickly as possible. We're also emphasizing, again, the need to institutionalize the culture of evaluation across government and civil society organizations, so that everyone knows why they should be doing what they are supposed to do with the information. Next slide. So what are the frameworks and organizational arrangements in the public sector that would help institutions or government be able to use information generated? We have the National Development Plan Results and Reporting Framework, which has well-elaborated indicators, targets, and so on, which enhance the use of information. We have the National Standards Indicator Framework. We have the need for provision of certificate of compliance to assessments by Parliament. We have SDGs, Agenda 2063 for Africa. We have monitoring guidelines, which in a way, if followed, and the DOT should be able to help managers to get the information they need for decision making. And obviously we have evaluation standards, which are basically managed by the Uganda Evaluation Association. And these standards in a way help to ensure that evaluations are done according to the prescribed standards, and therefore the information generated at the end of the day should be usable, because people will believe in how the evaluation was done. Next slide. We also have sector working groups, purposes of coordinating the way evaluations, monitoring and evaluation is done across sectors, and also to ensure that there is quality across the board in terms of how monitoring and evaluation is done. We also have ministries, departments, and agencies. These are like the foot soldiers when it comes to doing monitoring and evaluation. And the policy requires each of these entities to have a monitoring and evaluation unit to ensure that information is generated and used across the agencies and departments and ministries. In terms of local governments, yes, most of the implementation of government programs and projects is done at the local government level. And therefore, that is where we basically have to do a lot of monitoring and evaluation. When it comes to the comments on the key findings by the study, we do note that most of the observations made by the study are generally okay. And actually, most of them point to some of the weaknesses that are now being addressed by the Ugandan government in terms of use of M&E results. For example, in terms of operationalizing the policy, okay, we have insisted on ensuring that all MDAs and local governments have M&E units, okay, as a requirement by the policy. We also have one of the findings is in terms of the location of frameworks and the coordination entities. It's just a correction in the sense that in the case of Uganda, it is actually the National M&E Technical Working Group and not the National Evaluation Board. I think it was given the other way around. With regard to communication, yes, it is true. There is much higher level of involvement of civil society monitoring and evaluation. However, coordination between civil society and government is still a challenge, as we found out when we did a study specifically on health. In terms of on the weaknesses found during the study, that's the reason why we decided to undertake a number of training in terms of intervention, such as training of civil servants, development of a mechanism such as the communication strategy, management assessment tool, and so on and so forth. So we are good. There are those weaknesses, but we've been able to address them. How are we strengthening an update to the development in the country? We have strengthened coordination, monitoring, and reporting frameworks and systems. For example, we have a very strong monitoring and evaluation technical working group. In terms of evaluation, we have a subcommittee on evaluation, and so on and so forth. We've developed an integrated M&E framework and system for the National Development Plan. We have a full chapter in the National Development Plan on monitoring and evaluation. We've coordinated with development partners to ensure that their frameworks do align with the plan. And we have introduced a new forum for civil society organization partnership, the implementation of the NDP. And we have strengthened the research and evaluation function for better information planning, informed planning, and implementation. And we built research, and we continue to build the research and evaluative capacity across government. We have established and implemented an evaluation communication strategy, because one of the challenges that was noted in the study was that most of these findings are not communicated. Okay, and we have amended the relevant laws and regulations to strengthen institutional evaluation policy and so on and so forth. A weakness that was noted earlier was noted in the report as well as during the evaluation of the M&E policy. We've developed the National Evaluation Agenda, okay, and we encourage every MDA to have an MDA evaluation agenda. We have operationalized and strengthened the functionality of the M&E and within the planning departments, across ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as the local governments. And we have enhanced monitoring and evaluation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdul. Just very quickly before we go to Dr. Nana, I would like to remind all our participants just to keep the questions coming. You just go onto the bottom of your screen, open up the chat box, and add your questions there. I can see there are already a couple of questions. And now we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Nana Oparijan, who will speak to the Ghana M&E Culture Baseline Study. Dr. Nana, the floor is yours.
Yes, the baseline study that was conducted in Ghana actually produced some commendable results. We were happy this baseline culture study was conducted in the country. First of all, we observed that there were 4 major M&E suppliers in the country in the decentralization system that we have in Ghana, within the public sector space. In Ghana, we note that at the national level, we have 2 key institutions, the National Development Planning Commission and the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluation. They are responsible for the M&E activities in the country. But the NDPC has been responsible for the coordination of the decentralized planning system since the coming into force of the 1992 Constitution. And we have been playing that role as such. NDPC coordinates the preparation of the planning in terms of ensuring that the national policy framework is prepared. And that policy framework emanates from the President's vision, which is the coordinated program for socio-economic development. Then, subsequently, NDPC develops the medium-term national development, is what we call in short an agenda for jobs. In addition to that, the Commission issues planning and M&E guidelines to all MDAs, which means the ministries, departments, and agencies, and then the municipal, metropolitan, and district assemblies to prepare sector and district development plans for the medium term. Then, to ensure that we monitor the implementation of the medium-term plans, we prepare the National Resource Framework, which forms the basis for the M&E processes that we want to undertake. So the National Resource Framework focuses on our focus area within each of the dimensions of the policy framework, the indicators, the responsibilities, and the activities that are spelled out within the resource framework, and the time frame that we are sure to. Yeah, so the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluation also was established with the Executive Instrument EI 28, and it was established to focus on the priorities of government. So they have developed a national, what they call the Government Resource Framework to support that process. In addition, the National Development Planning Commission and the Ministry of M&E have jointly drafted the Ghana M&E policy document. And that was also done in collaboration with the Ghana Monitoring and Evaluation Forum in conjunction with CLARE AA and other stakeholders. The document is at Cabinet for consideration now. Then at the sector level, for each of the MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies, there is a unit called the Policy Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation Directorates. And they are responsible for M&E activities at the ministries level, the sector level in Ghana. In addition, the regional and the district level, the regional planning and coordinating units, which is a unit located at the Regional Coordinating Council. In addition to the district planning coordinating units, which are also responsible entities for planning and M&E at the district level, are also part of the structures that we have in the country. In all this, the study found that these institutions, these structures within the MDAs and MMDAs perform their functions in collaboration with the National Development Planning Commission. They base their planning processes based on the NDPC's planning guidelines that has been issued. Then there was one key vital finding of the study that NDPC coordinates the preparation of the monitoring and evaluation progress reports. And the progress reports are submitted to Parliament, so that Parliament will also look at how resources were used and utilized in the planning processes, the allocation of resources for the planning process. In all the processes, the study identified some key challenges among the various institutions. Common among them were the weak M&E capacities, the weak demand for and utilization of M&E resource, then the limited resources and budgetary allocations for M&E specifically was also identified. Then the study also observed that there was non-compliance with M&E reporting timelines and formats by MDAS and MDAS. In addition, data was a challenge in terms of the data received for reporting, the progress report preparation. There was an observed poor data quality and inconsistencies and poor management of management information systems. Next slide, please. To address some of the above challenges, the M&E system, the above challenges, the National Development Planning Commission has been preparing some reports over the years. And for the past 13 years, we have prepared about 13 annual progress reports since 2002. We have also prepared the National M&E Manual, and that manual has formed the basis for capacity building for stakeholders at all levels of governance in the country, including political leaders in the country. Currently, we are establishing an ICT-based M&E system, and we hope to also use it to complement the process for data collection and making sure that it is collected on time. There is a checklist for the review of sector and district annual progress reports and M&E plans. We have also prepared, as I indicated earlier, the National M&E Policy. And the M&E Policy will also assist us because we have observed that over the years, evaluation has been a challenge in the country, evaluation at the public sector. So we are using the M&E Policy as a way of making sure that we improve upon evaluation practices in the public sector. We have also drafted, and actually we have enacted 2 legislative instruments so that we use it to support the decentralized planning system and the planning commission processes. Recently, the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluation, in conjunction with some key stakeholders, including NDPC and the MDAS, conducted a resource fair, and they projected the results. They actually showcased results of the various activities that have been done in the various ministries, departments, and agencies, and then the Metropolitan Municipal and District Assemblies. NDPC has prepared a document called the Joint Agenda for Strengthening Monitoring and Statistics. The JASMIS document was also a showcase situation where we tested the document by having some discussions nationwide with some key stakeholders in the Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies. Basically, because of the challenges, we are recommending that evidence has been a key problem in the use of allocation of resources. So we, by this study, want to continue to build, which means the key stakeholders wants to continue to build at the national level, want to continue to build and guide M&E capacity development of public servants and political leaders in the MMDAs and MDAs. We've done that before, but we want to deepen the process further. Then, we also want to facilitate the preparation and implementation of district M&E plans. We are doing that. But our focus now is on strengthening the M&E data collection, analysis, and utilization of resources. Hence, we are developing the ICT-based M&E system to assist us. It is known as, the name is National Information Monitoring and Evaluation System, which will integrate all the other M&E process of the sectors and the MDAS so that we can use it to facilitate. It will become the evidence ecosystem where we will be able to meet all the information that we at the national level, and then NDPC will share with its stakeholders. So basically, what we intend doing now is to increase and facilitate. We want to increase the facilitation of development evaluations and participate in further M&E processes to enhance what we can do in Ghana. I think I'm done with my presentation now. We can ask questions if they need.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nana. And as you have rightfully pointed out, we will get straight into our questions. Okay, here's a question for Abdul. How have you tailored your communications, dissemination strategies, or messages to promote a culture of learning? Abdul, that is a question for you. And a question for you, Nana. JASMAS is great. Does it have room for evaluations taking into considerations the gaps you indicated with evaluations in Ghana? That is for you, Nana. And while you get ready.
Should I begin the response now?
Yes, you're welcome to respond, sir.
Okay. Yes, welcome the questioner, Richard Otu. Your question is very good at this stage. Actually, JASMIS has 6 pillars in the document, which will ensure that evaluations, because we have identified evaluations as the weak end in the M&E process in Ghana. So evaluations have actually been incorporated in the JASMIS processes. I indicated that the name is Joint Agenda to Strengthen Monitoring, Evaluation, and Statistics. So evaluation is part of the pillars, and we want to strengthen the pillars and strengthen that of evaluation. So, Richard, it is being taken on board.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go on to Abdul, this is a question for Carol very quickly. Carol, what is the single biggest contributor to M&E culture in a country? What is the single biggest contributor to M&E culture in a country? While she prepares for that question, Abdul, do you want to answer your question, please?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. We are looking at number of areas to address the issue of promoting learning and so on through the communication strategy. One, we are promoting the use of policy briefs across MDAS and local governments, that when you produce an evaluation, you must produce highlights or call them policy briefs. Number two, we are requiring whoever is going to do an evaluation, even monitoring, that in the terms of reference, must be a component on communication. And the communication should not only be about holding workshops, but should be aimed at ensuring that the findings are clear and well communicated to the various stakeholders. Number three, we know that the most viable way of reaching the citizens is through the media houses. And so the committee that is responsible for communication strategy has the members, the media houses on board so that they're able to communicate, report on evaluation as they report on other matters. Okay? And three and four, we are emphasizing in-house for MDAs and local governments that one of the hindrances to non-implementation of findings is lack of effective communication. And so as part of the culture of M&E, communication will always be emphasized. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Cara, very quickly, if you just answer your question.
Thanks, Parfait. I'm not sure there is a single biggest contributor to an evaluation culture, but and I suspect that the raft of what matters most varies by context and by government cultures. As we said before, M&E culture is just one subculture within a larger set of cultures and organizational culture. But I would suggest that leadership is probably one of the big things, and how sort of the tone and the norms and the behaviors that the ministers and the higher level government officials are sort of demonstrating and asking for. And that includes things like being transparent, open to failure, questioning and inquiring, and being self-reflective and critical.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was it. Thank you to all our speakers, to our three speakers. Thank you to our participants. Just to go through very quickly what we had discussed or what was presented in this webinar. Cara Waller, who is the Twende program manager, spoke to why Twende undertook this M&E culture baseline study and how it was important to improve the learning in the different Twende countries. Abdul touched on some of the findings, M&E culture findings in Uganda, and how, because the study was done in 2017, they have since made some changes. They've introduced a communications strategy and a communications unit attached to the M&E unit to better communicate on M&E in that country. Nana, just like Abdul, spoke about some of the findings and the challenges faced in the growth of the M&E culture in Ghana. And he spoke about some of the changes that have been introduced in that country, like ICT and then M&E policy, which has been drafted by both the NDPC and the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluations. I want to thank you all again for being here with us, and thank you very much, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.